What's up, guys? Conor O'Hanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. And tonight we are going over a lot of different news stories that has happened over the last couple of days. Since the last episode, especially, there's been a major Senate election, as we will go over the implications of that, the victor, Raphael Warnock, and what that means for Democrats moving forward into the next 2 years. We will discuss the nothing burger that is the Twitter files leaked by Elon Musk to journalist Matt Taibbi. And I guess it's technically not a leak if you own the company. But yeah, that's how that worked. And we will discuss that, what that was all about, the fallout, the future of it. Then we'll turn to a little bit of news that happened over the last 2 days with Trump's organization, legal troubles, tax evasion, etc. And the last thing I want to cover tonight, which is not in the headlines, is talking about the, quote, No Labels group, which is associated with Pennsylvania's 1st Congressional District Congressperson Brian Fitzpatrick and his nonsense, I should say, and my perception of his nonsense, and why no labels, and more particularly the bipartisanship for bipartisanship's sake notion is a bunch of malarkey. So without further ado, I would love to see it in chat. If you have hot takes on any of the issues that are going on tonight on the show, specifically around the Senate election or the Twitter files, those will be interesting. But without further ado, we will jump right on over to the Senate election that happened in the runoff for Georgia. And this is big. I didn't cover it last week leading up into the election. I probably should have talked about it a little bit. But when we look towards the future of how to run in these elections, I think Raphael Warnock has scratched a certain surface of rhetoric that works in more purple areas, as well as talking to voters and mobilizing them, frankly, over and over and over again, because this is the 4th election in 2 years that Raphael Warnock, excluding primaries, by the way, has been a part of. I don't think that he had any primary this year, but there's always the chance. So, but the honest truth is, it was scary to see the numbers coming in last night and seeing that they were so close. And again, like, I know that by the end of the night, Raphael Warnock ends up, and I'll show you guys, he ends up winning by almost 3 full percentage points. So it's not nearly as scary as it seemed throughout the night leading up into it. But with, 81% of the votes in, it was like 1,000 vote lead for Walker, which is not exactly where you want to see yourself with 81%. But these counties that have, Atlanta in it, Savannah in it, those were the ones that were coming in late, skewed towards Democratic voters, skewed towards minority voters, which were skewed towards Warnock, which that's how you end up with a 3 percentage point win. So this is important. This is a big pickup, because in the overall balance of power within the Senate, we have 51 Democrats moving forward and 49 Republicans, which is a 1-seat pickup for the Democrats, which is pretty rare in midterm elections to see a pickup in the Senate for an incumbent president's party. We see this, and it's important to note too. You saw it in not local but more local area where Pennsylvania, we flipped the state house for the first time in like a decade plus, and these are rare things to find when you have a Democratic president, or a Republican president for that matter, and their party actually picking up seats. For those who don't know, maybe you don't remember the Tea Party. I was a bit young too during the Tea Party, just admittedly, but coming into my own, politically speaking, retrospectively, we looked back a lot. I looked back a lot at the Tea Party and how Trump came to power in that Republican Party. And looking at that, you have to notice that not only was the most radical and fringe people in the party being elevated, but the overall party was being funded and elevated from the grassroots up, from local organizing up. You can see it in the way I talk about organizing, and the way that I emphasize that getting involved in your town, in your county, in your state. That is how elections are won and built upon the backs of the people that are at the township level, builds up to the state level, builds up to the federal level. That's how you develop your bench of candidates. That's how you get people that, yes, we had somebody that is a township supervisor. Now they're ready to run for state senator. Now that person might run for, auditor general, and which, there's tons and tons of ways that people progress politically speaking. But that is how you develop the party. Now, I bring up the Tea Party because in 2010, and 2012 for that matter, but not so much 2012, but under Barack Obama's presidency, there was over 1,000 state, local, and federal seats lost under Obama's presidency. And that is not necessarily, I mean, there are reasons to that beyond, there was a consolidation of power in the presidential election in 2008. That is a bit of speculative, because obviously I wasn't, in the inside at that point. That's a bit of a retrospective speculation on my end. But with that, control becomes a choking out on the local level. But foundations like Americans for Prosperity, foundations like Heritage Fund, all that stuff, Heritage Foundation, these thought, whatever you want to call them, leaders in the Republican Party that have billions of dollars, and they're leaders for that reason, fund local campaigns. They fund what you see like here in Central Bucks. You see millionaires funding people to run for school board to make sure that, we can't have pride flags, or because we can't have whatever it is, right? Anything that's simple. We're having book bans in the Central Bucks School District because of these people funding this nonsense. Whether we like it or not, they are the people that have been at it for a long time, and they've been building this capacity. And the capacity is just a party apparatus that puts people into power by spending a lot of money on elections. Now, it's important when talking about this on the Senate level. Warnock in the runoff election outspent Walker by like twofold, which is, again, this is concerning. This should be concerning to anybody that is a Democrat or a progressive, or anybody that identifies of, sane, because Walker was one of the worst candidates. And this is not I honestly am not knocking Raphael Warnock here, as I normally might in another election where there's a, whether it's Congress or Senate. I think Raphael Warnock kind of did scratch that itch for people. He did bring a level of just, I'm a reverend. Like, yeah, I've been your senator for 2 years, and I'm just a regular guy just like you. And that's good. And he talked about certain things in the run up to this election, corporate greed causing inflation, which is just a fact. Like, that's not even an opinion. That's just a fact. He's just bringing it to the forefront. People let that kind of stuff slide because it's sometimes hard to identify that corporate profits are hitting all-time highs while blaming inflation and doing all this stuff to cut costs down the line. So him talking about that stuff, I actually really look up to that. And the actual mobilization, I know people that went from, Pennsylvania and New Jersey and all these places and went and knocked doors and campaigned for Warnock and, became part of his staff in the last, 2 weeks or so. That's how you win an election. You mobilize voters and you intensify the message, get your rhetoric out there first. But it has to be said that Walker is somebody that is super hypocritical. Walker is somebody that shouldn't even be in the consideration of the realm of possibilities for a Senate candidate. He has no qualifications to make him such. But the fact is, by losing by 3%, which, yeah, in the grand scheme of things, is a pretty substantial margin. It's not Shapiro crushing Mastriano. It's not even Fetterman beating Oz levels. So I think we're in luck in the fact that Georgia, I think, is turning more blue over time, and we don't have to worry about a Senate election for 4 years until John Ossoff is up there again. We lost Stacey Abrams' election back in the regular election, which should be concerning. But Georgia is moving in the right direction. And having Georgia in the Democratic column moving into a presidential election is key. So just it should be noted, though, that Walker's rhetoric is radical. And the fact that he still only loses, he almost gets 50%, is absolutely insane to me. In the chat, we got a question. What should Dems do with that power as soon as possible? So here's the biggest thing that, and I'll take the map down. Here's the biggest thing that Democrats can do off the bat, and specifically in the Senate. With Warnock holding his seat, technically the only pickup is Fetterman in Pennsylvania taking Toomey's seat. We have the opportunity to pass every single judge that comes before the Senate without the approval of Joe Manchin. Which, yeah, that might be like, oh, that's it. But let me remind you that, and I said this in our Doyle Sun Democrats monthly meeting, elections have consequences. Consequences that lead to judge appointments that last for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, lifetime appointments. Judge appointments that lead to Supreme Court cases that lead to the rights of your neighbors, your friends, your family being stripped away. So getting the oil baron, the coal baron, I should say, really, Joe Manchin, out of the driver's seat is good. Moving Sinema into that position is not good because we didn't pick up 2 seats, but she is more somebody that has a little bit more of a political dynamism that might be able to have her flex and give support to Biden's administration. The key here is that we lost the House. So, in my opinion, there will not be much done over the next 2 years legislatively. But with a majority Democratic Senate, you can, and I know there's an overemphasis of courts here, but it is important. Appointing federal appeals judges, federal judges, and Supreme Court justices, if one becomes open, is how you enshrine constitutional rights for every single person in this country. Now, that should be reemphasized again. The Supreme Court is how common law creates constitutional rights for every single person, you and me included. You can see it, and I will maybe have Cyril on, or maybe I'll have Rotimi come back on and talk about the upcoming Supreme Court cases that are being heard right now. There are court cases yet again trying to otherize LGBTQ couples. A theoretical case, which I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. I think it's Harper, I believe. Where this, it's 303, I believe. It's 303 Creative or something like that. Is a website designer that is preemptively trying to ban gay couples from getting their websites designed by that company, even though there's not a actual couple seeking to get services from this company. So the radical Supreme Court which typically in any sort of normal reality would have said, okay, there's no actual case here. We're not going to listen to this case. There's not anyone actually suing. There's not anyone actually with damages. There's no actual case here to be made. There is no defendant. There is no plaintiff, basically. In practicality, at least. But yet this Supreme Court, this radical Supreme Court that was a seat was stolen for Barack Obama. Let's not forget that. This is exactly, and I have a question about the Kim Davis gay wedding cake. That is exactly the same. This is exactly the same implication of that case. So Kim Davis was actually the wedding, was not the cake, case. That was the wedding licensing case, which, as a state employee, if I remember correctly, she was not able to deny anybody the right to a marriage license under the state because the states legalized gay marriage. So that was that case. Now, the cake case and this website case are building a case, if I can say case enough, that is saying, and this is the potential outcome of both of them, which, because there's another variation of that cake case, basically, is they're functionally going to say there's a religious exemption to civil rights protections. And need I remind everybody, the Civil Rights Act of this country, passed in the 1960s under LBJ, does not include sexual orientation and gender. Let me repeat that. It does not include sexual orientation and gender. It includes sex, biological sex, and that's it. So it's religion. You're protected for religion. You're protected for race, color, sex, and age. But sexual orientation is not part of that. So if you are a gay person in this country, you can be discriminated against in many states across the country. That is what the 303 case is. It's a preemptive attack on same-sex couples and saying, we're not going to serve them. So the ultimate reality of this outcome will become clear a year from now. It's not clear yet because they're basically, the way that the Supreme Court is going to have this, or I should say right-wing activist funders of this stuff, these religious zealots, are promoting this to get to the Supreme Court on different aspects, because it should, at this point, it doesn't really matter precedent, but in theory, precedent would say that you have one case that proves the rest, but this court has proven time and time again that precedent means nothing to them, and they'll just throw it out, like Roe. So they're just going to keep hammering that nail and just keep going and saying that's not protection. And yes, to the comment in there, people keep fear-mongering about Hispanic and black voters turning right-wing while they voted for Democrats in larger margins than white voters during the midterms. Yes, in certain areas, I'll say. I will point out that in Florida in particular, Hispanic voters voted more for Republicans than historically have. But on the grand scheme of things, yes. And certain areas of this country, like Nevada, where they have a high level of Hispanic voters, those Hispanic voters are also, or Latino voters, are actually more progressive than the average American. Then there are Latino voters in Florida who are more conservative than the average American. So then it's not so much a monolith. I think all these voter blocks are looked at by the parties as monoliths, including white voters, older white voters, and black voters in general. I think, honestly, both parties, if you had to ask me, should be vying for every single vote, rhetorically speaking to voters across all different aspects. So the question in chat, it's legal discrimination against anyone not abiding by gender binary. Yeah, so this is the Civil Rights Act does not protect anybody based on gender. So if you extrapolate that, the gender binary that exists in society right now, really the biological male and female that you're talking about. If you were to extrapolate that and say there's two genders, male and female, even if, and this is important because technically speaking, someone that is transgender fits in within that binary. They are just the opposite of what their biological sex was assigned to them. Now, this is an oversimplification, I know, but it's just important to note. Even if you said, I am female, if you're a, male to female, transgender female, right? If you just said, I'm a female, you, by the sake of protections under the Civil Rights Act, do not get civil rights protections based on gender. So the archaic interpretation of that is based on your biological sex, not your gender. So if you were to get, I can't think of something off the top of my head necessarily that for you could get as a female instead of a male, but in theory, that would be, you could do it in the opposite way. Like there's no constitutional right to having a birth control provided for you for women, and that alone could cause complications if you have transitioned to be a man, basically, and all that stuff. There's complicating factors there, and yeah, if you're non-binary, by definition, you have no civil rights protections based on your gender. Now, this is a wide tangent, but just it's important to note that Republicans and specifically conservative justices like Samuel Alito have been arguing that political ideology is something that should be protected speech under the Civil Rights Act, and it should be protected speech under the Civil Rights Act is functionally an extrapolation of the First Amendment. But they are arguing that political ideology and expression of political ideology, he actually said in the case hearing this about this 303 creative, whatever it is, said that it should be protected if somebody's wearing a KKK outfit and saying all this stuff, which is, it's a fundamental disconnect on what freedom of speech is. It's a fundamental disconnect on what the Civil Rights Act is, and that would be okay if you were an average Joe, but this is a Supreme Court justice, so he should know better. Yeah, and you're right, and gay people have already had enough. Yes, it's we see it with a rise in attacks on gay people. We see it a rise on, you can look at the narrative that was brought up during the entirety of the midterm election going after trans individuals. These folks are not bright enough to identify what even non-binary means, so that's probably a good thing. They're making up lies about they want to have litter boxes in the classrooms, and they're coming up with this most ridiculous stuff to really just delegitimize, otherize, and dehumanize just fellow Americans, and it's pathetic. It failed, obviously. It didn't fail big enough where we held the House. But yeah, to loop back to the original question here, what can Democrats do? We need to prioritize the courts. Then we need to prioritize local elections. Then we can start to build a brighter future. You find someone, I'm supposed to have a little catch up with friend of the show, I can say at this point, Malcolm Kenyatta, and someone like him who's 31 years old doesn't get to the position where he's at, where he is now a legitimate power broker within the Pennsylvania party, at least, without winning his election and getting that local. I mean, it's a state rep race, so it's not exactly local, but for him, it's just it's a sliver of Philadelphia. So for him, he's building something bigger. So you get the investments on that smaller level. You build the experience. You build and build and build, and you have 20 Malcolm Kenyatas. You have 30 different people across Pennsylvania that are doing the same exact thing. You have people in New Jersey and in California, and then you go into red states and you start doing that. That's how you really build an apparatus and a party that is playing for all 50 states. A 50-state strategy is what we should be doing, the same way that we should go after every single county in Pennsylvania and every single state that we operate in as a party. That is the honest truth. If we're operating in Bucks County, you know what? The northern end of Bucks County, it might as well be Kentucky. But you still have to go and vie for those votes. You still have to go and talk to those people. And you will find there's a lot of commonality. And if we can talk, this kind of loops back with Warnock, but actually is better exemplified by someone like Josh Shapiro or John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. You can go in and chip away at those white working class folks that we as a Democratic Party have lost and bring them back in, because they are part of a class solidarity with people across our broader narrative, across our broader agenda of bringing a middle class, a working class movement towards the theoretical promised land of a better society, a greater society, as some might say, one that fights for everyday Americans. But you got to go and vie for them. And I'm not saying bend on principles. I'm not saying let bigotry fly, because that is a driving factor for some of these folks. That's not what I'm saying. You have to go out and vie for them, because your 99% of us are in the same boat. We should all be pulling for each other. And that is why you have to connect, diversify, empathize, develop that network bigger. Got a question in chat. I think we should look at other countries for more inspiration. For example, Latin America is having a huge left-wing resurgence with many grassroots campaigns. Cuba even legalized same-sex marriage. Yes. So looking at, well, the thing is, the reason, and this is, this is debatable. You see in a lot of Latin American countries a push towards the left, because there's also a rise in the far right. And America seems to have a unique, and I'd say some European countries, France, for example, have a unique aversion towards moving left when the threat of fascism exists. And I don't throw that around lightly, but the threat of fascism in some of these countries, like Marine Le Pen in France, and frankly, like some of the Trumpian candidates here in America, has created a we need to be safe. We need to pick the safe bet. We need to take Joe Biden. We need to take Macron. We need to take there's different Boris Johnson, who's like, he's a right winger, but like in England, so it's like they're just slightly different, right? So there's folks that far right comes in and it's a giant threat, whereas in Latin American countries, there's a lot of folks that do have that leftist streak. You can see a parallel, because in certain blue collar, very blue collar states, I would say, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania being amongst them, when you have a very progressive person that exemplifies the values of some of these folks, you get that leftist streak. You get that John Fetterman. You get that, you know, Bernie Sanders rise in Wisconsin. I allude to that a lot because that is that intersection of class and race and religion and gender that we need to develop. That intersectionality is a genuine thing that exists if we can bring it forth. It's not going to make itself. It's not going to just exist in nature. It's something that we have to work to create. Would I say that Fetterman's win is proof that Dems have some clout with white? I have the questions cut off here. Hold on one second. Would you say Fetterman's win is proof that Dems have some clout regained with white working class voters lost to Trump? I would say yes. And if you look at the post-election analysis, you can find that there are deep red counties that maybe that Democrats didn't win. And again, I think you have to take Fetterman's win almost with a grain of salt because he couldn't campaign to the same level that he should have been had he been healthy. 6 years down the line, we might actually have a better example of this. But I actually am going to use Shapiro's win because even though Josh Shapiro is not as progressive as John Fetterman, him going into these areas, having I don't remember, I think it's 60 counties or 67 counties of Pennsylvania, whatever it is. Every single county strategy is how you end up winning statewide. You have to, just so I'm proven right here. How many counties are in PA? 67. That was just off the top of my head. So, just knowing that you can go in to Dauphin County, let's just say, a red county, and you can pick off 5-6%. You might not win it. You might, like, Biden might have lost by 15-20% in some of these places. But if you can shrink the margin to 4-5% smaller, you're picking up in the margins. And in the margins where you're running up, like, I think Fetterman limited Oz to single digits in Philadelphia. Like, that's the type of thing where it's like, if you're getting 91% of voters in a certain highly dense area, and you can slowly chip off 5, 6, 7% in the red areas, you're ensuring longevity towards a movement and just moving that needle forward over time. But that's a lot of electoralism there. Let's switch over to some culture war nonsense real quick. And I say nonsense because I've been waiting for this guy's demise. I've been counting on this man's demise. So, briefly, because I don't think it's as much of a bombshell as some people seem to have thought online. I don't think it's as much of a bombshell as this fine gentleman thought it would be. But a quick recap on what this is. So, Elon Musk is now the owner of Twitter. And there's a lot of things that are wrong with Twitter. There's a lot of things that are moving in the wrong direction. He has had massive layoffs. He has fired people that are trying to unionize. He has fired the janitor staff. He has fired people that do specific parts of the app. He has fired ideological leftists, people that are ideologically left of center, for that matter. Any sort of dissent. He blocks people that dissent to him. He unbans Nazis and then banned Kanye West. It's there's a whole lot of complications with Twitter right now. And this Twitter file leak, whatever you want to call it, report, I suppose, was in coordination with Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi. And the long story short is there's not that much of importance that's coming from it. There was supposed to be multiple chapters of this, if you want to call it that. And as of right now, I don't believe that the second chapter has come out. But the first piece of this was largely talking about emails regarding Hunter Biden and the Hunter Biden laptop story. And of course, let's note that there are ways for people of influence, I'll say, reach out to Twitter and appeal certain tweets being out there to bring to attention to moderators, whether that's right or wrong. That is how that happens. And when you look up sorry, I'm just laughing at our boy Faustian Bargains in the chat here. I'm sorry that you feel that you're going to be sick talking about Elon Musk, or me talking about Elon Musk and Twitter, but you'll get through it, young man. So either way, this is ending up to be almost nothing, because the Biden campaign had reached out to moderators on Twitter regarding the Hunter Biden leaks, which had images of Hunter Biden, allegedly, which I don't think it's frankly that crazy to assume that it exists, but of him doing drugs, of him naked, of him, doing all of this stuff. So the initial response by Twitter and Facebook at the time was to make sure that until it was verified, to not let the story get out. And to be fair, this did happen. And one site where the leak was published was shut down on Twitter, linking to it. It was later rescinded, that was later allowed, but the initial shutdown is what people latch onto. And this Twitter files is largely an attempt at saying leftists, liberals, progressives that worked in Twitter were working together with the Biden campaign, and they tried to squash the Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, there's a little bit of, hiding the ball with regards to how much influence do they actually have on that? How much of that is actually just Twitter trying to cover their rear end as a publicly traded company at the time, and just not wanting to deal with the government at that point, which, by the way, they don't talk about this that much. The Trump administration, not the campaign, was pressuring them to censor people as well. So, if you believe that Twitter should be this open space of free speech and that's all you want it to be, then have at it. But the double standard shouldn't be applied to Biden when it wasn't applied to Trump. And I don't think that it's wholly unreasonable to say that an unverified source that said we have Hunter Biden's laptop, when Tucker Carlson at the time, if you recall, said that he had it on a secure drive, flash drive, that he never released. He said it got lost or stolen or something like that. It's pretty understandable to say this seems like Russian disinformation following what happened in 2016, and saying, hey, maybe we should let this play out first before it's just out here about all this stuff. Because if it was fake, it wasn't, but if it was, with all these with unverified things, then it would be a lot worse than it was. But let's take a look over here and say, okay, now in the reaction to it, this is in Forbes, so you can tell this is a real leftist organization. Forbes, it's like totally a communist and socialist website. So the former CEO Jack Dorsey, who he used to go on Joe Rogan's podcast. He would be interviewed by Tim Pool, right winger Tim Pool, about all this stuff. And the reality is, and I'll read this for folks that are just listening. Twitter's co-founder and former CEO Jack Dorsey urged Elon Musk to release, quote, without filter, Twitter's internal communications about moderation decisions relating to a report about President Joe Biden's son Hunter, dubbed the Twitter files, days after the first set of files published by journalist Matt Taibbi failed to deliver any surprising new details. So, what this says is, if there is all of this collusion, if there is all of this backdoor happenings, release all of it. And what further goes on in the article to say is, if that's the case, Matt Taibbi and Elon Musk should release their communications that set up the deal for Matt Taibbi to be the one to be reporting all the stuff that was, quote, leaked from Elon Musk. Because he can leak it, because it's his company now. He can do whatever he wants. What is omitted? What is included? Why not include all of the stuff instead of just being narrowly picking and choosing what comes out? It's a fair question to say. Yes, Faust. Tim Pool calls himself a progressive, but he is a right winger. And it depends on whatever issues you want to talk about, but almost everything I've seen him talk about signifies he's a right winger. Just because you call yourself a progressive, that does not mean you are actually a progressive. And no, you are using a fallacy in saying that, is he a Nazi also? No. Is he a racist? I don't know. But you can look at his actual stated positions and he would be on the right. That's just a fact. So it's like Dave Rubin calling himself a liberal. I've had friends call themselves liberals or a classic liberal, but that means very different things than what it used to mean. And they're just right-wingers that don't want to be called conservatives. I mean, that's fine. You can call yourself whatever you like, but that's not the case. Yes, and Elon Musk is a narcissistic hypocrite. The way right-wingers worship billionaires like him is insane. Yes. That is further exemplified in all of this, just by saying that, like, Elon Musk is supposed to be this Tony Stark-esque person, and yet he is spending his time moderating Twitter forums. But that is what you can do when you have near unlimited funds. But I guess good for him, right? America, you can spend your time doing what you like. So yesterday there was a story regarding the Trump organization being found guilty on all counts of criminal tax fraud. Woo! Who could have guessed? So, yeah, the debate in chat's a little bit hilarious. Manhattan jury has found 2 Trump Organization companies guilty on multiple charges of criminal tax fraud and falsifying business records connected to a 15-year scheme to defraud tax authorities by failing to report and pay taxes on compensation for top executives. The Trump Corp and the Trump Payroll Corp were found guilty on all charges they faced. Donald Trump and his family were not charged in this case, but the former president was mentioned repeatedly during the trial by prosecutors about his connection to the benefits doled out to certain executives, including company-funded apartments, car leases, and personal expenses. So functionally, this is a first domino in the legal troubles for Trump. Now, people ask me, and Faust, you might want to pay attention to this. You might be interested. People ask me, and this is my liberal cuckery, do I think that Trump will be locked up? Hashtag lock him up. Or will he go to jail? Or will he get indicted? Or will any of this happen? The answer is no. The answer is no. My opinion. His organization being found guilty here, we will get to another story about what happened breaking right before the show too. He is not going to be found guilty being attached to his organizations because the organization has the plausible deniability of, oh, the payroll company or this company, and he could just say, yeah, this was operating independently of me for the 4 years he was president. Of course, ignoring the fact that this was over 15 years. And remembering that despite what they say, and despite what we believe as the average American, the concept of nobody being above the law has been proven to be a false narrative over and over again as the Trump presidency, and frankly, the torture regime of the Bush presidency brought forth zero criminal prosecutions. The Mueller report, which some people consider to be a nothing burger, brought forth indictments of people around Trump, but not Trump himself. 2 impeachments. The second one being, first one involving corruption in Ukraine. The second one involving the attempted coup at overturning our election and hanging Mike Pence, will result in no punishment for Donald Trump. Personally. Because the notion of someone being above the law when they become the president has become the precedent. And the more we continue to let that happen, the less likely he will ever be held to account. And that's my opinion. And I would love to see it be wrong. But that seems to be the case. As we talk about crime coming out of 2022, because that was it was crime and transgender women competing in sports. That was the main crux of the Republicans' argument. We never hear the Republicans ever talk about white-collar crime. Being that I'm an accountant, I've seen the books and how things are moved around and smoothed and changed and slightly. I was an auditor, so you can't possibly convince me that the Republicans are tough on crime when the biggest criminals, the ones that have the most money, the most impact on society, are running free in our society. Now, the second story here is an extension, and it's a quick little extension of this, which is not really the former story. It's actually the Mar-a-Lago raid story. It's an extension of that, where, and I'll read, former President Trump's legal team has found at least 2 documents with classified markings at a storage unit in West Palm Beach, Florida, in the wake of the FBI's August search of Mar-a-Lago, several outlets reported on Wednesday. The documents were immediately turned over to the FBI. So, this is a minor story, but the implications being Trump has had classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, where he has the public. He has had them in a storage unit in Florida. Now, they did the right thing, that when they found them, they returned them. Good. That's great. But the precedent, again, precedent matters. The precedent, if in all honesty, if Barack Obama, almost 2 years after his presidency ended, was holding documents in his storage unit, what would the right be doing right now? Remember that a huge scandal of Obama's presidency was that he didn't wear a black suit, he wore a tan suit. And that he saluted troops while eating food or something like that. Like, these are the manufactured outrage that these folks have come up with, because there's nothing better to attack. Well, there's leftist critiques of Democrats, of course, but that's not nearly the case from these folks that are a bit too myopic about what they want for this country. But with that, I'd like to turn over now to this little quick story before we talk about the no labels folks. And that is the family of an officer who died on January 6th won't shake hands with McConnell and McCarthy. Reading here, relatives of the late Capitol Police officer Brian Sicknick, who died a day after being assaulted by right-wing rioters on January 6, 2021, refused to shake hands with the Republican leaders at a Tuesday congressional gold medal ceremony to honor those who defended democracy and the complex during last year's attack. So here we have the video, and I will play that for you right now. Give a little shake and a kiss to Schumer. Shake to Schumer. Sorry, Mitch. Sorry, Kevin. Shake to Schumer. Sorry, Kevin. Sorry, Mitch. See, it seems like a very minor thing to do, but remember that the politics of just be nice, the politics of being cordial, have only helped those that hold power in this country. Cordiality and bootlicking, frankly, only benefit those that hold power still. And folks like Mitch McConnell should not be anywhere near the levers of power. Folks like Kevin McCarthy, for that matter, should be nowhere near the levers of power, and I have a lot of respect for these people not shaking their hands as they're going up to receive this medal. So, last thing here, we have a report here on no labels. So, there's a few actually, but this is important for folks in Bucks County. This is important for people in PA01. Report says centrist group, which I call into question centrism, No Labels has a cutthroat culture where staffers are routinely fired or pushed out, have little trust in management, and a workplace that can be difficult for minority and female staffers. 14 former employees and 4 other people told me, meaning Daniel Lipman, who did the report. And if we go back one tweet, we have the Bucks County Young Democrats, which I don't lead, by the way, but I'm glad some people, come to me with a lot of this stuff, but this is not me tweeting this. But No Labels has given $41,250 since 2018 to Brian Fitzpatrick and sent out countless mailers and ads on his behalf. Fitz's problem solver caucus is currently a surrogate. He is currently a surrogate for the group. Fitzpatrick taking money from a group that treats employees as dispensable tools. That should not be surprising. That all while saying that the No Labels group is trying to come up with a no label unity ticket presidential campaign. The centrist group says its critics don't give it proper credit, but ex-staffers say the organization is rife with problems. This type of I want to dispel this notion real quick. We had in the Noel Sun Democrats meeting, and I appreciated them coming, a group, Fair Districts PA, come over and talk about gerrymandering, talk about bipartisanship, talk about partisanship in general. This shouldn't need to be said, but bipartisanship for bipartisanship's sake is not necessarily a good thing. Bipartisanship to work for common goals of the people is a good thing. Bipartisanship to work for the corporate elite is a bad thing. But this is somehow touted as, the greatest achievement. If we can get as long as something is bipartisan, it must be good, right? Wrong. Just because there's a consensus by a chunk of Congress does not make it necessarily good. The Problem Solvers Caucus, led by yours truly, Brian Fitzpatrick, is not actually bipartisan. It has bipartisan only by the fact that you have Joe Manchin signing onto bills, which does not make something bipartisan because he is functionally a Republican. So this no labels unity ticket amounts to a ego-driven, better than thou, smarter than thou drive by, and I am heavily putting this in quotes, a centrist group with corporate backing, with corporate intent, driven by greed and profit, to come up with a unity ticket, which would never have a chance, would only, and I'll say this now, if it was Trump versus Biden and there was a third-party unity ticket, it would ensure a Donald Trump presidency, because Biden is a centrist. Biden won the presidential nomination in 2020. And I'm saying this as a progressive who supported Bernie Sanders. He won the 2020 primary because he was the most moderate person on that stage. He won it because there was consolidation that the Republicans couldn't pull off in 2016. Consolidation by centrist corporate Democrats around Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden has governed more, I should say better, than I would have expected. But still, it does not mean it doesn't change the fact that he was the ideologically most centrist and most moderate presidential candidate in 2020. In the general, in the primary, etc. This no labels potential unity ticket undermines the actual centrist, Joe Biden, to ensure that the far-right Donald Trump gets reelected, or whoever it is, Ron DeSantis. Because Republicans are partisans. Democrats are less so. There are a good chunk of partisan Democrats, and that is the world that we live in. But Democrats tend to have more of the independent streaks within them, and they vote for people, right or wrong, that may or may not have a shot at actually winning. Look at 2000. That causes electoral losses, and that leads to catastrophic disasters. So, yeah, if we lived in a parliamentary system, if we lived in a ranked choice voting system, then there's a difference. But no labels putting forth a, quote, centrist is ridiculous. The organization, the same way as the Lincoln Project, not good. And it's largely composed of Republicans. And as we had in chat earlier, pushing for nonpartisanship or bipartisanship is usually a veil for republicanism and the right wing. But that is what it is. You can't control everybody, I suppose, right? Some of that stuff is just the way it is. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. It's great to have a troll in chat. If you're just listening, you can always go back and watch the show on YouTube. And when you do, hit the subscribe button on the channel. You can hit a thumbs up to help us get in the algorithm a little bit better. Maybe we might pick up a few more trolls along the way. You can follow me on Twitter at Con O'Hanlon. You can follow the show on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, Greater Society Media. And you can support the show for as little as $5 a month on patreon.com/Greater Society Media. And you can listen to the show on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else that you find your podcasts. So without further ado, I will see you all next week. Thank you again for staying with me. Stay safe. Peace.